What's up, everybody? This is Alex from the Duran, and I have with me Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of theduran.com. And today we're going to be talking about the Trump-Putin summit on July 16th. Okay, so Alexander, we did a video on this already about Bolton and the prospects of having a Trump-Putin summit. The State Department announced it. It's going to be taking place July 16th in Helsinki. We saw a very different Bolton than what we've seen in the past, a Bolton that seems to be ready to work with Russia. He gave a press conference. He was very measured, I would say, and he seemed very positive, very upbeat about the prospects of a cooperation. What do you think? How did you see the statements that Bolton made? What do you think about this upcoming summit? Give us your analysis as to how you perceived it.
Well, I thought Bolton was actually very diplomatic. Now, people don't associate diplomacy with Bolton, but of course he is a very experienced foreign policy professional, and he has worked in important positions like ambassador to the United Nations before, so he knows how diplomacy is done. And I mean, very strikingly, for example, he even complimented Putin and the Russians on the successful way they've handled the World Cup, which, I mean, he didn't need to do, but he did it, and I think that obviously creates a good impression. Now, the fact that Bolton is working so hard to be diplomatic in Moscow shows that some reports that had circulated, which is that he opposed the summit, are almost certainly not true. He seems actually to be a supporter of this, and I think if you go back to our previous discussion, I don't think that is completely surprising. I think Bolton and Donald Trump, and I suspect Michael Pompeo also, this new foreign policy team that has been created over the last couple of months, they are American nationalists. They see that there is no interest of the United States in this standoff with Russia, which is not benefiting the US at all. They want to work with the Russians to the extent that it is possible for the US to do so, to try to resolve certain political conflicts around the world and in Europe and in the Middle East. And I think Bolton went to Moscow intending to get this dialogue with the Russians going, and he's managed it, he's done it. And I mean, he managed to see some very important people when he was there. He saw Putin himself, of course. He met with Putin. There was the defense minister, Sergei Shoigu. There was the foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. There was Ushakov, who was one of Putin's top foreign policy advisors. In other words, the entire Russian foreign policy elite were there. They were talking with Bolton, and they seemed to come to some kind of understanding.
Now, there's some issues that I think people are expecting Trump and Putin to discuss in Helsinki, and then there's probably some issues that our viewers may not be well aware of that these two leaders have to discuss. A lot of it dealing with arms treaties, etc. Can you go over a list of what you think is going to be on the agenda between these two men?
Maybe three big issues, actually. The first is, I think there's going to be arms control. I think that for Donald Trump, this is an important issue. I think for Bolton, it is an important issue. Bolton, as we've discussed previously, is a strategically minded thinker. He is looking at the position of the United States at the present time. The United States is locked in a naval arms race with China in the South China Sea and in the Pacific, and it is facing a nuclear arms race with the Russians now leading the United States in hypersonic missile technology, and the gap there may actually be growing. I mean, since we last discussed this issue, there's been some suggestions that the Russians had even more tricks up their sleeve on that front. And at the same time, there's also been growing evidence that the military situation, the conventional military balance in Europe, may be starting to shift in Russia's favour also. So I think Bolton, looking at all of this, looking at the economic constraints on the US, understands and wants to bring that process of an arms race, if you wish, under some sort of control. I think that's also very much Donald Trump's view. Donald Trump was talking about that before he even became president. So I think arms control is going to be a very important topic for discussion between Trump and Putin when they meet, and I predict that there will be a commitment made for a new arms control treaty, some sort of new over-encompassing arrangement that will at least contain a situation that seems to be spiralling out of control. I think that is one issue. I think there's two other issues, two specific issues, which they will also discuss. One is Syria, and I think that there have been some hints now that Donald Trump and the US have accepted that they have lost the game in Syria, that there's not going to be regime change there. Donald Trump and Bolton have understood that keeping the US military stationed in Syria in places like Al-Tanf in the south and in Kurdistan indefinitely is simply not a sustainable policy. I think that they are also looking for some sort of way out of that, whereby they can withdraw US troops from Syria, allow the Russians and the Syrians to sort out some kind of constitutional arrangement in Syria, and I think they will be looking also for some guarantees that when the US pulls out, Iran, which is at the moment the US's great adversary in the Middle East, doesn't pile in and doesn't make Syria into some sort of Iranian satellite and launch pad against Israel. And I think that this is an area where the Russians may be able to help. Last but not least, I think for Donald Trump specifically, economic cooperation is an important factor. His hand has been hobbled to some extent by the sanctions, but maybe the ground will start to shift there too. One of the things which Donald Trump is clearly extremely aggrieved about in his relations with the Europeans and with the Chinese is that he feels that the Chinese and the Europeans have been taking the US economically for a ride. They've been exporting to the US. They've been stealing ideas and technology from the US as he sees it, as he complains, and he's acting strongly against them. But the Russians have never done anything like that. And I think that at some level, Donald Trump, who is, let us never forget, a businessman, sees in Russia a potential business opportunity. And with his very strong links to some elements of the US business community, including the oil industry, maybe we will start to see some movement in that direction. We shall see.
What are the two things, if you had to break down, say, after the summit meeting between these two leaders, what would you say would be a big win for Trump, optics-wise, media-wise, and what would you think would be a big win for Putin? Like, how do you think, if this thing ended after the summit and these two men had to make an announcement, what are the two things that you think, like, Trump would say, I got this, and that's a big win, and Putin would say, I got this, it's a big win?
The first thing to say is that having a summit at all is going to be a big win for both men. For Trump, it will be a sign, if it is nothing else, to the people in the United States who've harassed and hounded him and who've made his life terrible over the last 2 years with allegations that he is some sort of Russian agent. It'll be a sort of finger up to them. It'll be a way of saying to them, look, I'm not afraid of you anymore. You're not able to, you're not biting at my heels anymore. Your investigations have come to nothing. I am now the President of the United States. I can finally meet with whomever I wish. So from his point of view, that is a big plus. From Putin's point of view, any negotiation with the President of the United States is also a plus because, as we've discussed previously, it means a relaxation of tensions between the US and Russia. Now, what they will each be looking for, I think, for Trump, if he can come back to the United States and say to people there, I have come to some kind of understanding with Putin on arms control, I think that will be something which, especially elite opinion in the United States, some sections of it will see the sense of it and logic of it, and which I think will also play well for many people amongst the American people, the American public generally. So I think for Donald Trump, some movement on arms-related issues is going to be a plus. For Putin, I think he's going to be looking more for some sign from Donald Trump that Russia is finally being taken seriously in the US, that the Russians have all these concerns about Ukraine, about NATO expansion, about Syria. The US under Barack Obama basically, and indeed George W. Bush beforehand, always behaved as if what the Russians think and say doesn't matter. And if Putin can go back to people in Russia and say, well, look, we've now managed to leverage ourselves to a position where the Americans are finally listening to us and taking us seriously, even if we still don't agree on many things, I think that will be seen by many people in Russia as a vindication of Putin's policies and as a sign that his firmness over the last couple of years has borne fruit.
Finally, Alexander, this on a lighter note, maybe not a lighter note, but let me throw out these questions for you. What do you think is the significance, number one, what do you think is the significance of having the summit in Helsinki, i.e. close to St. Petersburg, close to Moscow? So in other words, it's definitely a summit which is closer to Russia, closer to Putin's home. And number two is, what do you think about I've heard the chatter that perhaps Trump and Putin will actually go to watch the final World Cup match, and Netanyahu will also be there. He's already been invited. He's confirmed. So what do you think the chances of that are? And what do you think the optics and the significance of having Netanyahu, Putin, and Trump together in some VIP box watching the World Cup final will be? So first, Helsinki and the significance of Helsinki and the possibility of having these three men together watching the final World Cup match.
Right, well, I mean, the first thing to say about having it in Helsinki is that it in effect means that Donald Trump is going to meet Putin, not the other way round. So it establishes Putin, if you will, as the more senior of the two. If you go back to earlier summits, if we go back to the very first summit that ever happened between a US and Russian leader, which is the summit that took place in Tehran in 1943 with Stalin and Roosevelt. The fact that Roosevelt went all the way to Tehran to meet Stalin, Tehran being of course much closer to Russia than it is to the US, at that time was seen as an act of deference by the US to the Russians. And I think we have to construe this the same way, because the thing to always bear in mind is that Trump had initially wanted Putin to come to Washington, and the Russians resisted this. Putin was not keen to go to Washington at this time for perfectly understandable reasons. He's insisted on holding it in Helsinki. Helsinki is a city which was once formerly a part of the Russian Empire. If you ever visit Helsinki, the Russian influence in Helsinki is still extremely strong. The centre of Helsinki, in fact, looks like a mini St. Petersburg. And I think that it is almost equivalent to Putin being the host and Trump being the guest. So that puts Putin in a strong position. Now, the optics of Donald Trump crossing over to Russia, going to the World Cup with Putin and Netanyahu, I mean, they're going to simply be tremendous. It's going to show that these three are friends. And I can imagine what some people are going to say. They're going to be absolutely horrified by that. I mean, they're going to be people all around the world who will be delighted, and there are going to be some people, especially in Europe and the United States, who are going to be absolutely horrified. But having Netanyahu there, actually, if that is what happens, is very clever. Because, of course, if people have been saying, yes, Trump is this Kremlin stooge, they've never really said that about Netanyahu, and it's really possible to say that about Netanyahu. So if you don't criticise Netanyahu for being in that VIP box with Putin watching the World Cup, how can you logically criticise Donald Trump for being there also? So I think the optics will simply be tremendous. They will be on every front page of every newspaper. They will be the big poster around the world. And there will certainly be a sign, not just that these people are friends, but that relations between Russia and the US are on track, and this period of extreme tension, which has existed for some years now, has passed. And as I said, they will make some people choke over their cornflakes. I mean, that's all I can say about it.
God, what I can't wait to, if that happens, I just can't wait to see that photo of those three guys watching a football match. What do you think of, if you had to put a percentage on it, that actually does happen, what percentage would you put?
With Donald Trump, it's very difficult to say. I would put it at about 30%. But, you know, he surprises us. He's the kind of man who does unexpected things. And it's very much in his style to do something like that. It's one reason why he's such a, I think, effective politician, is that his actions are never completely predictable, and that he's prepared to take extraordinary steps like this, which, as I said, set the whole world alight, put him at the centre of attention, because let's be quite frank about this, it will be Trump who would be at the centre of attention. And I think it could pay him actually quite big political dividends. So, though I have to say, I think his advisors will advise against it, and that might be that it won't happen. I don't discount the possibility at all, and that's why I put it at 30%, and it might be actually a bit higher than that.
Yeah, but Putin has some tricks up his sleeve as well, so he can be quite convincing from what I hear.
Putin is also an extremely clever man, and extremely well. He's also very. He's got an eye for political theatre, unquestionably. So, as I said, when you have those two men working in combination, well, who knows? We'll just have to see.
We'll have to see for sure. You know, it's going to be a story that we're going to follow, and it's going to be an incredible July 16th to see, you know, Trump and Putin together, and possibly with Netanyahu at the World Cup. What a story!
Tremendous.
It'll be tremendous. Absolutely. Alexander Mercouris, thank you once again for a great analysis on the Trump-Putin summit that's going to be taking place in Helsinki, July 16th. Guys, if you like the video, click on the subscribe button down below. Also click the notifications bell to get notifications every time we push out a new video. And visit the Duran shop, pick up a shirt, support the Duran. Until next time, take care.